Today, we're going to look at the truth regarding training for males past the age of 40. Personally, I feel this is an important topic to cover because for the most part, this age group is only provided very one-sided information. It seems like every 40-plus training workout that you come across in mainstream fitness magazines and media seem to treat the readers as guys who don't know what a dumbbell is and already have one foot in the grave. For the guys who are in shape, have been training for years and now have entered the 40-year-old bracket, well, they're left all on their own to try and work this aging stuff out. In this video, we're going to look at the main factors that any 40-plus male needs to be aware of and how they will hugely influence their success in the gym as each year passes. We're going to look at hormone levels, intelligent recovery, and appropriate yet effective training approaches. We're going to look at these from a couple of angles. So no matter if you're a 40-plus well-trained and in shape already individual, or a 40-plus individual wanting to get in shape for the first time in your life, you'll hopefully be able to relate to one of these angles and see how these discussed factors will affect you. First, let's get to know the three viewpoints that we'll be looking at this information from. First viewpoint is the viewpoint of Chad. Chad is in shape. His condition is muscular and lean. Chad has been training for over 20 years. Chad eats well, eating specifically to support his efforts in the gym. Chad has just turned 40. Second viewpoint is from the viewpoint of Roger. Roger is not in shape. Roger is a little overweight and has below average muscularity. Roger used to regularly train, but at age 30, he stopped. Roger has experienced a serious physical regression over the last 10 years. Roger has just turned 40. And the final viewpoint that we'll look at all this information from is from the viewpoint of Brian. Brian, like Roger, is not in shape. Brian is overweight and has poor muscularity. Brian has never followed any form of exercise programming in his life. Brian too, he's just turned 40. Okay, with our three viewpoints, our three gentlemen met, let's get into this. First, let's start with the big one. Testosterone. Testosterone is the primary male sex hormone. In male humans, testosterone plays a key role in the development of male reproductive tissue, as well as promoting secondary sexual characteristics such as increased muscle and bone mass. In addition, testosterone is involved in health and well-being. Insignificant levels of testosterone in men lead to abnormalities. Now, as you age, your testosterone levels naturally decrease. From a 2008 meta-analysis, it's believed that after the age of 40, your testosterone levels are dropping by 1.6% naturally every year. Now, that 1.6 decline is if you're healthy. A 2002 study observed that those not in good health likely experience further accelerations of age-related declines in test levels. It's important to know too that the study defined good health as an absence of chronic illness, absence of prescription medication, absence of obesity, and an absence from excessive alcohol consumption. Now, from our three viewpoints, our three gentlemen, Chad is the only one that would likely fall into the healthy testosterone declining range, losing that 1.6% a year from now on if he remains healthy. Roger and Brian, as we said, are both overweight. Now, we're not saying they're obese, but that extra excess fat stores around their midsection isn't helping their test levels. And if we're talking about your average Western country 40-year-old out of shape male like Roger or Brian, some form of alcohol consumption no doubt is part of their weekly routine. Now, unfortunately, chances are out of the three of them, Chad, Roger and Brian, if anyone was on prescription medication at all, based on pure averages and probability, it would likely be Brian. All those factors are contributing to a faster, beyond natural declining of annual test levels for Roger and Brian. So what do these naturally declining and accelerated declining test levels mean for our three gentlemen wanting to stay in shape or get in shape? For Chad, as each year that passes, he's going to find it a little harder to hold his current lean muscle mass and hold his current level of lean body fat percentage. As the years go on, if he follows exactly the same training and nutrition approach that worked from up until 40, he would likely end up experiencing a slow, gradual physical regression due to the accumulating annual testosterone decline, a slow drop in muscle tissue, and a slow increase in body fat stores. Roger and Brian, they're starting behind the 8 ball. They are both walking into their beyond 40 training life with already lower levels of test than Chad, and currently with more rapidly depleting annual declines. From a pure testosterone concentration point of view, they are starting behind Chad. But this is where Chad is at his biggest disadvantage, or faces his biggest challenge, from a mental viewpoint. Understand Chad has been experiencing increasing physical improvements pre-40. Roger, since he stopped training at 30, for a decade has been experiencing physical regression. And Brian, who has never followed any training, has been physically declining from way back when. Both Roger and Brian, if they exercise correctly, along with good nutrition, will experience health improvements and will naturally experience improvements in their test levels. They may over time be able to bring their levels up to the naturally healthy declining rate for their age, which for them will feel like a vast improvement. Chad, on the other hand, if he doesn't realize what's happening and account for his naturally declining levels, he's going to gradually feel worse, experiencing declines in energy, recovery, and overall physique quality as the years slowly creep by. The result Chad has been able to experience to date will be more challenging to achieve once he passes 40 if he doesn't carefully look at his approach. The next influencing factor that needs to be carefully considered is recovery between training sessions. The actual process of recovery is the same for anyone training no matter what age you are, where you start at your baseline, you train and therefore fatigue. Your body then goes through its recovery physiological processes, not only returning to baseline, but into the supercompensation response in which you hopefully repair bigger and stronger, adapting to the previous training stimulus. Studies have shown, though, due to alterations in metabolic recovery when we age, a longer recovery period is thought to be required before returning to baseline levels. As well, though inconclusive, certain studies have shown that the recovery rate of oxygenated hemoglobin is reduced in older trainees compared to younger. As well, early studies, even though there is some conflicting studies, have shown evidence that the rate of phosphagen and creatine replenishment is slower in older trainers than younger. So what does this mean for our 3 40-year-old gentlemen? First of all, this doesn't mean that the day they turn 40, your very next workout, they're going to be recovering slower and longer. It doesn't work like that. For Chad, it will mean gradual, over time, as the years go on from now, that he will start to notice that if he trains at the same volume, intensity, and frequency as he did pre-40, that he'll eventually be walking into his sessions likely still sore from the previous. His slower rate of recovery and adaptation will eventually catch up. Brian, who's never trained before, isn't gonna know the difference. He has nothing to compare it to. This could actually be viewed as a mental advantage in his favor. Roger, on the other hand, is going to be the one who feels this factor the most, or who will notice the difference more than anyone. Remember, Roger used to train. He remembers what it was like. He remembers how it used to feel and how long it took him to recover between sessions. Starting back up again after 40, he'll experience from day one slower, longer recovery rates than what he remembers 10 years ago. This time round for Roger, it's going to be harder. What needs to be noted too is that the recovery we're obviously referring to is the skeletal muscle exercise-induced stimulus. What needs to be considered now too for these 3 guys moving 40 and beyond is the wear, tear, and years of use on their joints, ligaments, and connective tissues. Now, of the 3 of these guys, Chad is the most at risk here. Remember, Chad has been training for decades. Not only does he eventually need to account for increased recovery times from a skeletal muscle recovery point of view, but needs to start programming his training around adequate rest and downtime for any possible previous injuries that might already be there and any joint and tendon niggles that will slowly appear as the years continue to pass by. For our 3 guys, especially Chad, they need to start listening carefully to their bodies. When their bodies feel off, they need to train around any issues using exercises that are easier on their bodies. In no way am I saying to drop the big lifts, but being smart with programming and having counter programs when things aren't feeling right means that they'll keep progressing injury-free. Next thing we need to look at for our 3 just turned 40 gentlemen is ideal training approaches moving forward. Let's take Brian with no training experience first. Brian needs an approach that includes both resistance and cardiovascular training. Brian's primary focus should be on losing extra unwanted body fat first. Lean muscle development initially should be a secondary focus. With Brian being able to rid his extra fat stores and make health improvements, his declining test levels will improve. This is where he'll experience, for the first time, via structured exercise and nutrition, improved energy levels. Now remember, Brian has never touched weights before. Even though he's 40, he's an absolute newbie to the weights training game. He will have no learned exercise movement patterns, so it requires a tailored training program to accommodate this fact. Initially, Brian's training needs to focus on establishing key movement patterns and getting familiar with his targeted muscles contracting under load. The truth, right out the start, is minimal body composition changes will be directly from Brian's efforts in the weights room. He'll mainly see improvements initially from his cardio and nutrition efforts. The payoff for the resistance training foundation work he puts in at the start will come a little later. Brian's weight training initially won't be at a point where overtraining will be a concern. So with that in mind, HIIT training is what Brian should be working towards incorporating as his method of cardio. Depending on just how unfit he is initially, low intensity steady state cardio can be what he starts on, but his first training program goal would be to improve his fitness levels enough to make HIIT cardio his primary cardio method of choice. From this, he'll experience improvements in aerobic fitness, further help improving movement patterns through the required explosive movements involved in his HIIT sessions, and even start teaching his muscles fast twitch muscle fibers to fire, something he probably hasn't experienced for decades. Eventually, once Brian's experience increases and his tailored program is always evolving to meet his rate of change, his weight training should eventually become the primary method for his future body composition changes. Now Roger, similar to Brian, through resistance training and cardio exercise, Roger's primary goal should be to lose the unwanted body fat he has present. And yes, while nutrition and the cardio is going to be the primary tools to make that happen for Roger, Roger has a little extra up his sleeve. Roger has a little something called muscle memory on his side. Remember, up until the age of 30, we're saying Roger regularly trained. During his years of resistance training, thanks to a regular physiological repair process, Roger will hold an increased volume of nuclei in his skeletal muscles to this day. Even though he's lost his muscularity and previous size over a decade ago, he hasn't lost the increased volume of nuclei. It's the still present increased nuclei volume that is the mechanism for his muscle memory, and what gives Roger an advantage. Roger's increased nuclei means a greater volume of protein synthesis being able to occur. The more protein synthesis able to take place, the faster new lean muscle tissue can be built. Roger has the ability to build new lean muscle at a faster rate than, say, Brian. With this in mind, Roger should first start with a short phase of movement reintroductory, spending a couple of weeks following a tailored program that has him performing exercises that he once did 10 years ago competently. The movement patterns will return very, very quickly, similar to how you never forget how to ride a bike. The same will be for his exercise patterns as well. Once a couple of weeks of re-establishment has been completed, it's time to fully take advantage of the muscle memory and get into a tailored exercise program focusing on progressive overload, form, and building on intensity. Cardio definitely needs to be present in Roger's approach to getting back in shape, but we need to be careful not to conflict with his weight training. With Roger, the faster we can have him building new lean muscle tissue again, the faster his body will be geared to be burning fat stores on a day-to-day basis due to an increased metabolic rate. So with that in mind, low intensity steady state cardio is ideal for Roger. No extra central nervous system stress and no interference with localized muscle recovery that can be a risk when HIIT training is incorporated. This is what's optimal for Roger. Now, our mate Chad. What's the best approach for Chad? Chad's focus is going to be continuing to make progress in muscularity and body composition. Just because he's turned 40 doesn't mean this should change. What needs to be checked though is any ego-based training, and instead replaced 100% with smart, intelligent training methods, comprised of a wide range of different hypertrophy mechanisms and triggers. In basic terms, Chad has 4 main triggers that he can use when trying to stimulate muscle growth. Load, the amount of weight he lifts. Intensity, how hard he actually pushes himself on each set. Volume, how much total work he does in a single session. And frequency, how many times a week he hits a particular muscle group. What Chad needs to understand is all can't be set to high all of the time. But if they're set right, he can stimulate muscle growth effectively while minimizing risks. What I often do personally and for my clients experienced and over 40 like Chad is focus on the triggers intensity and frequency, while load and volume I'll prescribe much lower than what I would have been performing if I was designing their programs if they were younger. Now, for exercise prescription, like I mentioned earlier, while I don't drop the big lifts like the squats, deadlift, and weighted chins, they now don't take up the biggest percentage of your programming. I'll prescribe lower stress exercises because they allow me to have the client pushing the intensity up as much as possible with very minimum risk.